The following is a presentation of the Fellowship Church at Anthem, a community of faith, love, and hope. For more information, please visit fellowshipanthem.com.
Why don't you be seated, my friends? Hey, I want to tell you something about our band. Some of our band men, women. See that guy right over there in the yellow? That's Jim. Jim plays. The day he's back there banging all those drums and such. Jim had a birthday this week. He's now 65. See that girl right there in the blue shirt? Her name's Nikki, and she leads our band along with Josh. And Nikki, this afternoon, she's going to be taking her final driving test for her motorcycle license. So, if by the way, if you've got a really large hog that you wouldn't mind loaning her today, that you also don't mind high-risk sorts of layout. But so, Nikki, congratulations in advance. We know you're going to do awesome, and we'll look forward to seeing you come rolling up next week. That'll be awesome. Now, if you saw Nikki up here playing her keyboard, would you ever in a million years assume that she was like a motorcycle chick? Now, probably not. I mean, you might assume that she would ride on the back of Josh's motorcycle and be that kind of a motorcycle chick. But you might not assume that she was actually the motorcycle driving sort of motorcycle chick. She's what? Well, she will be soon. I do know that. It's sort of, when we look at people, we kind of read things into them, don't we? We make assumptions about them that we think we know who they are or what they're about, or we think we know what they're thinking, what's motivating what they're doing. And we call those assumptions, and we're walking right now through the Four Agreements. It's a little book written by Don Miguel Ruiz, and he wrote it about, about 15 years ago or so, and just simple basic truths that make life work better. And when I look at the teachings of Jesus, it's some of the same kind of stuff. Jesus' teaching was introduced into a highly religious environment with such simplicity that they tried to sort of discard it and discount it, because they were all into the value of the teaching was determined by the complexity of its ability to be understood. And Jesus was like, no, here's the deal. Connecting with God and living according to His purpose and walking in freedom and all that, that's really pretty simple stuff. And you guys are trying to overcomplicate it. And it makes you look important, makes you feel important, but the reality is you're missing the point. And so, I apologize. I hate it when I get up here with my gum. But you'd hate it worse if I didn't have my gum. So here are the Four Agreements. We've been working through them. Today is the third one. The first one is be impeccable with your words. It means be on target with your words. That the word impeccable comes from one of the biblical words that we use for the term sin. One of the Greek words for sinner is pecador. And so if your mate is in some sort of relational violation with you and you don't like what they're doing, just call them. You're a pecador. It means you're a sinner. And see where that gets you. But anyway, be on target. We think of sin as being like this huge unholiness, this huge unrighteousness. But the word impeccable, the word pecador, this kind of definition for sin in the Bible really is about missing the target. So here's where I'm aiming for, and I'm slightly off target. So here's what's right and good and holy and wholesome, and I'm just a little off target. And so Ruiz's first agreement here, or his first contract that he says we make with ourselves, is to be on target with your words. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Be honest. Be truthful. Be encouraging. Be positive. Let the words that come out of your mouth and the words that go on inside of your head be valuable. Let them be encouraging. Let them be positive. The Bible has a ton to say about that, about the way we speak and what we speak. So be impeccable with your words. That's the first one. The second one is don't take things personally. We talked about this last week, and I think some people got upset when I talked about it. Apparently they took it personally, and they're never coming back. No, this is such a tough one for us. The underlying assumption of this one is that we sort of, at times, we take things so internally and so personally that are not intended to be that way. And so here's the foundational element of this. What other people think about you is none of your business. What other people think about you is none of your business. You can't control it. You can't stop it. Oftentimes it's not accurate. So just don't even give it like 2 seconds thought. What other people think about you. If we do that, if we don't take things personally, we walk through life in such an unwounded kind of way. Whereas if we're like prone to take things personally, then we walk through life just constantly dodging all the darts, verbal, emotional, relational, and we find that it's just not a great way to live life. So just don't take things personally. And then today we're going to talk about don't make assumptions. And then next week I'm going to be talking about always do your best. So these are the 4 agreements that Ruiz says if we live our lives by these simple agreements, if we commit ourselves every single day to watching what we say in our head and outside of our mouth, if we commit ourselves every day to not taking offense, not holding things personally, every single day of my life, if I make a commitment to not assume that I know, and every single day if I make a commitment just to do my best, my life is lived with unbelievable freedom. Here's Ruiz's quote at the beginning of this chapter on this particular agreement about assumptions. Really like this. All of the sadness and the drama that you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. Yeah, I did a little bit of inventory myself this week, and I realized that there's not very many things in my life that I have become upset about or sad about or have been some source of drama in my life that were not rooted in me taking things personally or making assumptions about other people that were not accurate, or even making assumptions about myself that were not accurate. So pulling back, not assuming, is a great source of freedom. It's hard, though, because if you're going to walk through the average day of your life and not make assumptions about the people that you work with, people that you live with, people that you interface with on a day-to-day basis, if you're really going to do that, it's going to require an extraordinary amount of intentionality. I can't even really watch the news anymore. It just drives me crazy. It's sort of insane, and if you're in the media business, I apologize in advance. I know we do it to make money and capture viewership, but it's so interesting to watch like breaking news. If there's like a big event that happened, could be tragic, could be just big news. By the way, everybody know who won the British Open? Okay, don't say it out loud because some people are taping it. Okay? So don't say it. I will tell you it wasn't Jack Nicklaus. He's dead. No, he's really not. But anyway, think about what happens, like, breaking news, and we have the breaking news music, and we all perk up, and we're like, oh my God, something's happened in the world. Something dramatic. Right? And then we have reporters in the field and at the desk helping us understand facts about a situation that nobody has facts about yet. Right? It's like, this tragic situation just happened, and We don't really know, but we have someone on the street who has a cell phone, and they took a little bit of video, and they got it from their neighbor who was actually down the hall from the person who they say this thing happened to, and so now we have them live. And then we get all this like extrapolated, inferred. It could be true. We don't know this. This is undocumented. It's unverified. And so the news media sometimes, instead of just using the term, we're assuming this. They don't want to do that because they get such liable and all that. So they just infer things. So it comes really naturally to us, right? It's everywhere in our culture. We think we know what other people are thinking, seeing, doing. We think we know why they're thinking what they're thinking. Once we assume in our minds what it is they're thinking, then we think we know why they're thinking that. It's dangerous, right? Assuming is dangerous. And at the root of assuming is all kinds of sadness, all kinds of drama, all kinds of bondage, a lot of lack of freedom. And it really can wreck our lives. In the day of modern technology that we live, we have to be able at times to not automatically assume, to not make a snap judgment, because it can really get us in trouble. I was texting a friend of mine this week, and because of the wonder and beauty and magic of technology, now we can speak into our phones, and it will interpret what I'm speaking into written text, and then it will send it to my friend. So I was doing that. I spoke into my phone, and Siri magically translated it, and then I hit send. And I should have looked at it before I hit send, but I did not. And it's just sort of I think it's part of growing up in Oklahoma and Texas, but a lot of times if I see you, particularly guys in general, I don't do this a lot to women, but a lot of times guys, if it's just sort of like a term of endearment, I call guys buddy. Hey buddy, how's it going, buddy? And so sometimes in a text to warm you up or something, just friendly, it's friendly text. Hey buddy. I try not to call girls buddy because it's awkward. And then just a heads up, sometimes I call you buddy if I can't remember your name. Full disclosure. Okay? So, but if I do call you buddy, don't assume that I don't know your name. Okay? So anyway, I just, hey buddy, just wanted to tell you, whatever, and then I hit send. And I didn't know it until this morning, and he came up to me and he said, hey, did you know that the other day when you texted me, you called me Bunny? And then what do you do? What do you say at that point? Of course I did. It was just a little friendly play on rabbits and such. Oh, thank God he didn't assume too much in my text, right? The problem with our assumptions is that we believe they're truth and they may not have any basis in truth. That's the challenge with an assumption. We see a person and we assume something about them that may not be based in any way in reality. It's our truth, but it might not be the truth. And then what happens is if, in fact, that person is not what we think or not what we assume, then they push back and now we're stuck because for us what we've assumed was right and true. And in our culture there's such a premium placed on us being right that when that person we made an assumption about pushes back on us, now we have to defend our assumption. It's like, well, I thought this because you said that and you did that and you acted like that. And when I said that, then your face went up and then I thought, oh my goodness. Well, so I was completely justified. Yeah, you were, but you're dead wrong. Well, that's hard for us to hear. Nobody likes to be wrong because of the value and the premium that we place on being right in our culture. So, how do we work through this whole thing of assumptions? How do we come to a place where we, first of all, don't assume that we know what the other person in our life is thinking or what they're doing or why they're doing it or what they did? How can we get to that place? How can we create some clarity in what we think we know versus what we actually come to know? Let me give you a couple things today to help us create clarity. Because this is so critical for us, having clarity. These assumptions that we walk through life with can be so damaging and so wounding to our relationships. The first one is suspend judgment. This is the first step in creating clarity. So when you walk into a particular situation and your natural default response is to assume that you know what's happening in that situation, that you know what that person's thinking, that you know what they said, that you know the tone of the voice that they said it with, implying all kinds of internal meaning. The first step is to step back and to suspend judgment and just go, you know what? No matter how much I think I know, and no matter how much I believe I'm right, I probably don't have all the data that I need to make a completely informed understanding or judgment about the situation. So we suspend it. We hold it up in the air. We don't judge the person as right or wrong. We don't judge the statement as good or bad. We don't make any sort of judgment. We just suspend it completely. That's the first step. Now, often that requires us pushing back from the situation. And that's hard for us to do because the premium and the value that we place on being right. Not only do we want to be right, but we want to be right first. And we want other people to know that we are right. And we want them to know how right our rightness is. And so oftentimes our rightness is projected quickly, it's projected loudly, it's projected with energy so that they know that we were the first that is right and our rightness is the rightest rightness. Well, pushing back for just a couple seconds and go, okay, hang on a second. Let me gain more understanding before I make a judgment about this person or this statement or this situation. Let me push back. That is unbelievably hard to do. I had a great opportunity to do it this past week. I think it was last week. Might have been the week before. No, I think it was last week. I had my iPad was cracked, fell on the ground, cracked. And so I was trying to have it worked on. So while it was being worked on, I was working off my laptop up here. And that night, I got home and I was doing some work on my laptop. And it's about 8 months old, something like that. Pretty new, and it is a Mac, which again is a testimony of technological superiority in the world. And I think even last Sunday when I was using my MacBook, I was bragging about how awesome Mac is and Steve Jobs, God rest his computer, how awesome he is. And then that night I got home and I was working around and all of a sudden my computer stopped working. And, it gave like funny colored screens and symbols and such. And I was like, this doesn't seem good. And so I consulted the Oracle. I went on Google and I said, all right, what's wrong when my computer acts like this? And she responded back and she said, your hard drive is bad. Well, immediately in my mind, I'm thinking about the fact that because my computer is relatively new, and I assumed that it had long-term, energy and life, I hadn't backed it up in like 8 months. And I made an assumption that it had the capacity to live longer than 8 months before the hard drive crashed. And apparently it doesn't. And it didn't. And so middle of the night when I was consulting and trying to figure it out, I had an opportunity at this moment to suspend judgment. I'm like, all right, I believe that I've potentially just lost 8 months worth of data. And these past 8 months of my life have been more productive than the previous 48 years. And so I was like, I got a lot of important things here that have just apparently disappeared into the world of the nether regions of hard drive crashing. And so, but I tried to suspend judgment. I tried not to assume that it was gone. So I go and I visit my Genius friends at the Mac store the next day, and she runs a couple tests, and she says, yep, your hard drive is dead. And I'm like, now my assumptions are validated. And so, sure enough, they had to replace my hard drive. And so all week long, I've been functioning in a state of non-data, non-current data. And it was my own fault. I totally owned it. And then Nikki, the soon-to-be biker chick, not on the back chick, but up front driving chick, she says to me, hey, I got a guy who he knows how to recover dead hard drives, and he's amazing. And then, okay, so now it's time to get an assumption out that this guy is a magician. He's going to make it happen. So I get the old hard drive back, take it down to him. He starts working on it. I get a text from him, and he's like, all right, good news and bad news. Good news, it's still working. Bad news is I can't see any data on it. So I assume it's gone. And I'm like, you know what? Gone. I just let it go. I surrendered it completely. So I've lived the rest of this week with no data, and it's been incredibly liberating. Just free. People call me and it's like, hey, did you get my email? Nope. Didn't get it. No. Wish I would have. Might have, but I don't know. Hey, that file that you sent us last week, could you resend that? No, it's gone. It's gone. Love you, though. It's gone. And then yesterday I got a text from the magician of data recovery. And he said, good news. It's been churning. And I can see all your files on it. You're going to get all your data back. And my heart leapt. And so last night late, I drove down and I picked it up from him. And said, now I got a lot of work to do. Now I got to answer all those emails from people that I had formerly said, nope, data's gone. Fresh start, clean start. It's interesting, though, how your mind just goes automatically to assumption. It crashed. It's all gone. Oh, magician. Oh, he can get it back. And then a magician's like, oh, he can't do it. Oh, okay, it's all gone. And then he's like, nope, got it back. All right, awesome. If you don't step back, all of the emotions and the drama of life can send us on the roller coaster ride like every single day, times 100. So the first step is to suspend judgment. I don't have all the data here. One of my favorite stories about assumptions happened in an airport. And it was one of those busy moments in between flights, and a lady's sitting down, and she had her newspaper, and she was reading her newspaper, and she had some crackers that she had just purchased, and she was going to eat them. And so she's reading her newspaper, and then all of a sudden a guy sort of, taps on the table, and he's like, hey, do you mind if I sit here with you? It's a crowded, waiting area. And she's like, no, help yourself. And so he sits down there, and she's reading away. The next thing she knows, she hears crunching. She kind of lowers her paper, one eyeball over, and there he is eating her crackers. And she's like, her face just, she's like, I'm just, oh. And she's like, do you say something to a man who just takes your crackers? And so finally she lowers it and she goes like, well, I hope you're enjoying that. And he's like, I am. And then she's just getting furious, and she just, then he taps on the paper. She lowers it. He offers her one of her crackers. She's like, no thanks. She's mad, storms on the airplane, sits in her seat, puts her paper away in her bag, and as she's putting her paper away in her bag, she looks down there. There's her package of unopened crackers in her bag. He bought his own crackers. Those assumptions are dangerous, aren't they? Even when all of the appearance of the moment says, hey, this is what happened. This is what's true. We have to step back and go, hang on a second. Do I really understand what I think I understand about this situation? The first step is to suspend judgment. Jesus talked about this in Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. He says, if you judge other people, then you're going to find that you too are being judged. That often escapes us, doesn't it? It's like if I say something about someone, it's like, you can't believe that person. They are such and such and such. And I lose sight of the fact that if I'm willing to place those kinds of judgments on that person that I might not have full understanding of, what is it that makes me think that they are not also doing the same thing of me? And maybe worse. And then Jesus goes on to say, this is Matthew chapter 7, this is the Sermon on the Mount, so he's given all this great sort of practical advice. He says, indeed, you're going to be judged by the very standards to which you hold other people. Ouch. Right? And then, so imagine this, right? It's like, it's a little bit stinging to hear Jesus say these words. Don't judge other people, because remember, they're also going to be judging you. And by the way, however strict you are on them, that's how strict they're going to be on you. I tried to use this on my parents when I was growing up, and I found it didn't work very well, right? But imagine Jesus, all these people are sitting out there listening to him teach this, and they're thinking about this, and they're beginning to realize, you know what, he's dead on right about that. He's right about that. And then Jesus says, as he often would do, he would take a truth and set it out there and let him kind of think about that for a minute. And then all of a sudden, it's like a zinger right to the heart. It's like this wasn't enough, like I didn't get it enough. And so then look at what else he says right after this passage. Same passage of Scripture. Look at what else he says. Why is it that you see the dust in your brother's or your sister's eye, but you can't see what's in your own eye? Why is that? Don't ignore the wooden plank in your eye while you criticize a speck of sawdust in your brother's eyelashes. Use a great little analogy, right? It's like you got this massive stick in your eye and you're trying to pick a little bitty piece of sawdust out of your brother or your sister's eyelashes. You can't see clearly. You don't know everything you think you know. That type of criticism and judgment is a sham. Remove the plank from your own eye, and then perhaps you'll be able to see clearly how to help your brother flush out his sawdust. It's a great translation by a friend of mine who really worked hard to put the Scriptures into our modern understanding. It's a translation called The Voice. And great passage, great way to translate Jesus' teaching so that it's just clear, it's understandable. Before you point out someone else's flaw, make sure you take time to look at yourself, check yourself, step back, and suspend judgment. All right? So the first step in the process of creating clarity is suspend judgment. Here's the second step. This seems so obvious, right? Just ask questions. So once I take a step back, now I can see the whole situation a little bit better. And now it's time for me to actually ask some questions. I can engage in a conversation. So if I'm having questions in my mind, if I lack certain sorts of clarity in my mind, now it's the time for me just to begin to probe a little bit and go, hey, let me ask you about that. Or, I'm a little bit unclear as to exactly what you meant when you said that. Can you help me understand? Or, I'm not really sure that I have the whole story here. In fact, I'm sure that I don't have the whole story. Could you just help me gain a little better perspective on this situation? Or sometimes I just like to say this to people. It helps me sort of verbalize what I need to be doing. It's like, you know what? I probably have some preconceived ideas about this situation. I'm just going to step back a minute, and I want to take a different perspective. Will you help me see this differently? It's a great piece of vulnerability, and it's hard for us to do, again, because of the assumption that our perceptions are always right. They're always based in rightness. Oftentimes, it's very easy to believe that everyone sees life the way I see life. And those that don't truly should. But if I will ask some questions, and oftentimes take the courage, have the courage to ask the right kinds of questions. I'm not talking about interrogation questions. Well, so tell me what you meant when you said that. That's the wrong kind of question. Oh, so what you're saying is, that's not a question. That's a statement. A question really tries to solicit more information from a neutral place, not from a biased place, from a neutral place. So ask some questions. Have the courage to ask some questions. A lot of times, when we're in the middle of making an assumption, what's important to us is not what's true. What's important to us is what makes us feel safe. If I think I understand the situation and I interpret it correctly, and it makes me feel safe, that's what's really important. What we don't like is the ambiguity. We don't like unanswered questions. We don't like unknown things. And asking questions forces us to realize that there's a lot of things out there in the world we just don't know. And that's hard for us. It's hard to come to grips with that. Think about it. If you ever in those conversations and like there's 3 or 4 people standing around and someone says something like, "Hey, do you guys ever see that movie? Remember that movie whenever so-and-so was out there and such and they were doing that thing and she said to him, 'Hey, have you ever, you guys saw that, didn't you?' 'Yeah, I saw that.' But I really didn't see it. But I don't want you to know that I'm not a part of the knowledge base of the world. I don't want you to think that I know less than what I actually do know. I want to be in." So oftentimes that fear keeps us from asking questions, just to ask the questions. I don't understand fully what's happening in your world. Would you just give me some feedback? Would you give me some understanding? This happens a lot in our most intimate relationships, husbands, wives, significant others. We enter those relationships assuming that we know what the other in the relationship likes and wants. And so we act accordingly. But it bites us every single time. Every single time. Right? Think about this. Have you ever heard this statement in your deepest relationships? "Well, you know what I wanted." You ever heard that? Of course. And then the appropriate response, always prefaced with a, "I'm not a mind reader." It's true. None of us are. So have the courage to ask. It doesn't demean you to ask. It actually puts you in a place of strength. So suspend judgment, step back, and then ask questions. Ask questions. All right, here's the third step for seeking clarity. Learn to listen. Learn to listen. This is, again, often such a great piece of conflict in our lives because of our assumed position of rightness. We assume we know. We assume our knowledge is right. And so we don't really need to listen. We already have it figured out. We already have them figured out. We assume we know where they're at. So I don't need to listen. I got you dialed in. I understand. And it's not the case at all. The assumptions that we make so fast out of our perceived rightness. And we also make them oftentimes unconsciously. Listen to what James says in chapter 1, verse 19. Such great practical advice. He says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry." If you're challenged with the activity of intentionally listening to the people around you, let me give you 3 little listening tools here. Here they are. Here's the first one. Practice the no interrupt rule. Okay, this is great for any of your dynamic relationships. Just learn to practice the no interrupt rule. So whenever I'm speaking, what that means is that you do not have the opportunity to speak. Our brains are not equipped to multitask, so I should not be able to speak and listen simultaneously. So when I'm speaking, what I need you to do is be not speaking. And I'll pay you the same respect. When you speak, I will not speak. So, if you have somebody in your life that is a chronic interrupter, and because they know what's right for you, they're constantly rushing to judgment, and before you can even finish your statement, they already have the solution for you to fix your life and make your life better, make you a more contributing factor in the world. You can institute the no interrupt rule at any time in that relationship, and it goes like this. So you're talking along and you're trying to explain yourself, you're trying to get them to know where you're at, and they just they barge in verbally. At that moment, you just say, hey, time out, hang on just a second, hang on. And you have to do it with some drama because they're doing it subconsciously and they're doing it so quickly. You may have to do it with a little bit of, hang on. I have just embraced the no interrupt rule in my life. And if you'd like to have a relationship with me, I only participate in relationships with people who also practice the no interrupt rule. So from this point forward in all of our conversations, we'll be enjoying the no interrupt rule. And now it's my turn to speak. When I'm finished, it will be your turn to speak. Most of us learned this in preschool. We forgot, right? So here's the second one, the 5-second respond rule. It's a great one too, right? So when someone says something to you, especially if they're trying to explain, don't immediately fire back. If you've mastered the no interrupt rule and you're no longer a chronic interrupter, don't say anything for 5 seconds. Do something with body language that indicates sort of pensive activity. Thought. And in those 5 seconds, it will give you time to think about how to respond appropriately. Now, for some of you, what you might have to do to really practice this is actually go, That's legit. Do that. That's fine. Just don't fire back. Sit for 5 seconds before you say anything. And then the third rule, this is a really great one. I learned this from Gary Smalley. Does a lot about relationships, the drive-through rule. So when someone says something to you, repeat back to them what you heard them say. And you can begin it with that little phrase. So what I hear you saying is this. Or what I think I understand you to mean is this. It's like when you drive through Starbucks. Say, hey, I want a quad espresso macchiato, a tall cup, half calf. And then I wait for them. And when they come back to me and they say, you want a venti iced Americano with double whipped cream and a cherry on top and a frozen omelet. I'm like, no, apparently you did not. Right. It's the same in our relationships. Someone says something to you, you respond with what they said. That way they know you heard what they actually said. It's a great little rule, drive-through rule. So these are all available for you today, free of charge. Here's the last one. Seek to understand. So if I step back and I suspend judgment, and then I ask some very intentional questions, and then I listen, one of the things I'm listening for is understanding. I want to really understand what it is you're saying. I want to understand what you're feeling. I want to understand your position on this particular issue. I want to understand. Help me understand. And we have to pursue it. We have to seek it. So before others even have a chance to rush to judgment, we're in a posture of going, okay, let me try to understand. Let me see if I know where you are. Check for that. Be really clear about this in your interactions with people. Understanding means accepting, but it doesn't necessarily mean agreement. Okay? So if you say something and your position on a particular issue is X and my particular position on that same particular issue is Y. But I think you're leaning closer to Y, but you're really not. You're leaning closer to X. And I finally come to understand, oh, so this is what you mean. This is where you are. Now I'm in a place to accept you just right where you, I'm not trying to change you. One of the challenges in all of our relationships, we're constantly trying to change the other. We don't have the power to do that. So we understand and we accept them right where they are. That doesn't mean I have to agree with you. I still like Y. I understand you're at X. Awesome. I like Y. So understanding means acceptance, but it doesn't necessarily mean agreement. Here's a final passage for us today, guys. It's in Proverbs, one of those wisdom books from the Old Testament. Proverbs chapter 3. Look at this. Joyful is the person who finds wisdom. You have to pursue it. You have to seek it. The one who gains understanding. It's something that you have to be gained. Something you have to work for. It doesn't just automatically happen. You have to work for it. The person who gains understanding is the joyful person. Wisdom is more profitable than silver. Her wages are better than gold. It's a great agreement to walk through your day and just not make assumptions. Not automatically assume to know about people in your life, about situations in your life, about challenges you're facing. Seldom do we automatically and immediately know the whole story. So step back, suspend judgment. Ask some questions. Even if it's a situation that's not a person, ask some questions of the situation. What do I really know here? What do I think I know? What do I see what can't be seen? What's in my blind spot? And then listen. Listen. Listen to the conversation. Sometimes you need to listen to the voice of God. And then seek understanding. It's incredibly valuable. And it is at the heart of a joyful life.